When you're a kid, self-expression in all its glory is encouraged. There's always a surplus of arty crafty goodies and all the time in the world to use them. Parents simply ask that you express yourself. Often, Mummy and Daddy remain by your side to offer a helping hand and offer some words of good old-fashioned encouragement to make you feel that little bit better about those unfinished masterpieces. But as we get older, this support from the olds generally dwindles. We're asked to remove the safety pin from our ear, bypass the wacky tobacco, hit the books and get a real job.
There are, of course, some people who luck out. They get the best of both worlds, a so-called real job that pays them to express themselves.
They are called columnists and increasingly feature on more and more of the pages of our broadsheet and tabloid media.
On the face of it, they seem to have carte blanche to get away with whatever they like. But an incident that occurred in February this year got me wondering about the limits of this self-expression.
Michael Bachmann is an Australian-born British writer who obviously likes stylised portrait shots. This one's from his personal website. Anyway, I digress. Up until February this year, Michael wrote a regular business column for The Age. On Saturday the 17th of January, his article entitled "Israel Living High on the US Expense Account" very quickly caused a huge furore.
The column's critical of Israel for what it describes as the country's inability to transform Palestinians from enemies into friends. This, Bachmann says, has led to bombs on London public transport, bombs in bars in Bali, and even the loss of the World Trade Center towers in New York.
Oh yeah, and it also says that Israeli backpackers are notorious for being badly behaved in Nepal. Anyway, on the Monday morning after the article ran, the chairman of the Australia-Israel Jewish Affairs Council got on the blower to the editor of The Age, and that afternoon they met face-to-face to discuss the problematic article. The next day, an apology appeared in the paper, explaining that the column had been published in error, that the opinions were not endorsed by The Age, etc., etc., and just 3 days later, an apology from Bachmann himself appeared. Then, in early February, the editor of The Age suspended Michael Bachmann's columns for 3 months, adding that reinstatement would not be automatic.
Did I find it offensive? No. Would I have written it quite like that? No. Was he naive in thinking it wouldn't have caused a... I don't know, I haven't spoken to him, I don't know what he thought of, did he expect the kind of furor? I'm sure he didn't expect it.
That's Anthony Lowenstein. He's a writer and freelance journalist who's also been quite critical of Israel in the past.
If you ask, I'd say, most opinion writers or journalists in Australia or elsewhere, they will say, we can write what we want, no one's telling us what to say, there are no lines, there's no boundaries. And technically speaking, that may well be true, especially if you become older and more powerful, etc., you're seen to be untouchable, so to speak, relatively speaking. I think, though, there are undoubtedly certain issues that are seen as not so much off limits, but there are certain perspectives that most people avoid. I think it's more that my experience with Israel-Palestine has been the number of... I've lost count over the years of the number of journalists in Australia or overseas too who've said to me, who may be relatively sympathetic to the Palestinians, critical of Israel, that they're not necessarily stopping because they are being told they have to stop. They stop it to avoid the potential shitstorm that's going to probably come if they write about it. So rather than saying, for example, during the recent Gaza war or the Lebanon war or the occupation, whatever you want, that this is really harming the chances of peace, this is causing more extremism, etc., etc., they just won't go there. And they won't go there because when they have gone there in the past, they are inundated with emails, with phone calls, with attacks on their editors, etc., etc. And it seemed to be easy just to shut up.
Last year, in an article about changes to immigration under the Rudd administration, columnist Paul Sheehan referred to certain refugees that had migrated to Australia in the 70s and 80s as parasites. There was a slight controversy after its publication, but he and the paper didn't apologise, and his column remained. Peter Manning has had an extensive career in the Australian media. He used to be the top dog at Four Corners and the former head of news and current affairs at both the ABC and the Seven Network.
I do think that it's not a level playing field, and the shock jocks and people, the equivalent in newspapers like Piers Ackerman, get away with blue murder for what they say, particularly about Muslim people, Muslim families, Muslim men. If they were said about Jewish people or Jewish families or Jewish men, there'd be, cries of anti-Semitism, etc. So I think, it's not the same rules for both sides.
You speak to many journalists and editors in Australia or overseas and they'll say the same thing. If I publish a story critical of Israel, I'm going to be getting 1,000 emails by 9 o'clock. If I do something critical of the Palestinians, I won't get anything. Now, what does that say to a journalist? That'll say to a journalist, or a media company, that unless there is some, I'm not saying it has to be undue pressure, but at least representations that there's another side out there. It's obvious that there is, but if the so-called Muslim community is not pushing their message stronger, and one of the issues I think that's happened in the last years, the Jewish community is very effective at saying to the wider community, we speak with one voice on Israel. It's not true, as I know, but the fact is a government minister or journalist or editor would generally think, gee, Jewish community thinks this on Israel, right, we get that message. The Muslim community, what do they think? Well, they're probably against Israel, but who really knows?
There's no doubt about the fact that there's a powerful Jewish and Israeli lobby group in Australia which, there's nothing wrong with that. It stands up for its rights and it puts its point of view very strongly, but often maybe to places like the board of Fairfax and the editorial people at Fairfax and so on, in a way that maybe most people aren't aware of.
You ask about are there boundaries for certain issues. Yes, when it comes to bashing Muslims or the Islamic world, then there are no rules. Because the only people who are going to be complaining, according to what the media would say, is some Islamic spokesman who can't speak English very well, he kind of calls up and complains, like they care.